Hey everybody, this is Perch, and some people have asked about the power of the incumbency, and the question is basically like, is part of the problem with Marvel and DC, and why some of the comics at least feel like they don't particularly care. And we'll get more to that in a minute. Is a lot of the problem just that they are so established at a number one slot that to move them off of that number one slot is near impossible, and so therefore the motivation to really do better or work hard to change your company is just not there. And I think it brings up a couple interesting thoughts. The biggest is that to a large extent the way the current comics industry is structured is that the gap between number one and number two, in this case Marvel to DC, and then more importantly the gap between number two and number three, which would be DC to Image, it's vast. That gap from number two to number three is really, really significant. And I think a lot of people have been tricked in the last, I don't know, few years especially, that anything could happen, and that the a number three company could in 2 months somehow figure it out and just do better and become the champion. And there's a lot of movies where like they'll do a little montage of like people working hard. I guess in comics you'd have like pictures of artists frantically drawing on pages and people like running, big files from one place to another, and then like printers spewing off pages, and Dan Slott asleep in his office, and you get this nice montage of things. And there's this idea that there would be an easy way for some indie to come up and take the top spot. And the reality, if you talk to anybody in the business, or even if you don't, if you just kind of really look at how things work, it would be very, very hard for somebody to actually take that position. Now, I know that flies in the face of a lot of people who believe that Marvel and DC are on the brink and they're about to die, and their corporate overlords don't care about comics and everything else, but it's not quite that simple. I mean, for one thing, while I do agree, I don't think Disney and AT&T spend really any time thinking about comics. They do, nobody likes to be number two. Nobody likes to not be the number one company. And when you have these established IPs, I mean, look, you see it with Batman. At this point, DC can just vomit up another Batman book, and it's going to sell 50,000 copies, and they'll be able to license it and print it on pins and T-shirts and all kinds of stuff. It's very easy for them to make money. If for Marvel, if they wanted to, and granted, I don't know they do want to, but if Marvel said, hey, you know what, let's go ahead and pay Mark Silvestri what he wants, have him come in here, have him do a Wolverine book, and we'll make a big deal out of it. They could do it. I mean, J.J. Abrams and Son got a lot of money for that book, and it hasn't really sold, but they can make those things happen relatively easily. They have the capital, they have the backing, and they have the market share to do it. So it means that if one of the indies ever start to really, really come up and get going, there is enough power within the comic book groups alone that they could push back pretty hard. They wouldn't need to do too much. I mean, it's funny. A lot of people talk about kind of the death of one company or another, but if you're DC and you're basically sitting there and you're starting to, let's say, lose ground and lose share, your most likely thing that's going to happen is not go out and write a bunch more checks and hire in top tier artists and writers. It's not going to be just say, well, I guess there's no way for us to win. We'll fold up shop. Let's just stop. The most likely thing they would do is just say, hey, all those, which books are the lowest selling 20%? Yeah, cancel all those and make more Batman books. The end. And that would work better than we'd like to admit. Better than I'd like to admit, because I think there's enough Batman books. We don't need more. But I'm not saying things are impossible. So I think anybody on the indie side of the world listening to this, I mean, don't be defeated by saying this. Just understand the game you're playing. You're playing, to some extent, a rigged game. You're playing a game where the big incumbents there's such a gap. And the other piece is Image. So Image, even though they're number three, it's questionable if they're really trying to be more than that. And the way the entire Image model works is, they're kind of at the mercy of, people are bringing in pitches, and then they're basically picking and choosing what they want to run with, and then there's a buyback. It's not built to be a number one or number two company in comics, unless Marvel and DC fully vanished. And we've done many videos about why that's highly unlikely to happen. So it's that creates another problem, because underneath Image are your Boom and your Dark Horse and your Vault and your Zenescope and all these other companies, and they're all trying to kind of get things moving, but they have to pass the first wall, which is Image, to really start to break out and be seen as more. And Image is the one thing that they do focus on, is making sure that their brand is kind of established as king of the indies. That's what they want to be. That's how they want to be established. And yet they're really not playing like, I mean, the business model at a Boom or a Vault or Zenescope or a Dark Horse or Antarctic or TKO or any of these other companies, Artisans, all these, is very different from what Image does in a lot of respects. So they're playing a different game, but still, in order to kind of be seen as bigger, they've got to go through Image to get there. And that's going to be difficult to do, just by its nature and kind of the battle you're fighting. And then once you've done that, you've got to figure out how to win against a Marvel and DC. But it's like you are a comic company and you're fighting a comic company slash merchandising brand slash licensing engine slash, video game and digital properties company slash owned by a multi-billion-dollar corporation. It's like it's not a fair fight. It's not a one-to-one fight. It is apples to oranges, or maybe it's apples to wrenches. It's a completely different ballgame. And I think I got started on this because there was a question that I got to basically say, what would it take for one of the indies to take down a Marvel and a DC? What would it take? And the answer is a lot, and it may not be even a possible battle if you play it on those terms. If you're playing it on the terms of you need to beat Marvel or you need to beat DC, it's going to be a head-to-head contest between the two of you. You're almost starting out with failure. Your goal should be to create a sustainable business. Your goal should be to create wealth and recurring revenue that you can then pay your people a higher, you should look at the market rate, and then you should vomit on it, and you should set a new market rate that's much higher than that actually pays people what they're worth for, creating major IP and brands that can be transferred around the universe. That's the game you should be playing. You leave Marvel and DC to their own devices to do what they're going to do. Have Image kind of be that, for lack of a better word, I mean, I don't know, it's kind of like a DIY / comics publisher thing. I mean, it's a different beast, and make your own path to success. I think chasing these other guys is basically going on their turf and playing their game with their rules and their referees. You're very unlikely to win. And I think the thing that's going to take down a Marvel and a DC at the end of the day is kind of what people have been talking about. It's that, they find a better, clever way to get that IP out and get stuff established and fill the coffers for their licensing and their merchandise and their movies and everything else without bothering to make the comics themselves. I don't think that day is close. I know some people do. I know some people believe that day is very, very close, but I don't think it's close at all. But it doesn't really matter. Again, I guess this is the key part. As an indie company, as a creator out there, all of that doesn't really matter to your success. Your success is independent of all that, whether they're around for 1 year or 20 years. And I think a lot of people fall into a trap of they have to go away for me to be successful. And the answer is no, they will either go away or won't go away. Your success is not in playing their game. Your success is not in beating Marvel or DC. If that is your goal, that's a stupid goal. That's the wrong, that's not going to make you wealthy. I mean, and I guess to cap it off completely with this, you got to figure out what you want in life. If what you want is money, then going and trying to beat Marvel and play in that space, it may not make you as much money as you think. A lot of people at Marvel make garbage money, like not just bad money, but garbage money, and nobody should be satisfied with that level of finance. And so, if your goal is to make properties known around the world as much as Spider-Man and Batman and Superman and all the rest, okay, well then at least it is more analogous to Marvel and DC. But for there, you got to set your expectations. You're not going to do that in a year. You're not going to do that in 10 years. It's going to take a long time. And you have to ask yourself, is that really your goal? So what are you after? It's interesting. A lot of people frame it up of how do we beat Marvel and DC, and my thought every time is always you shouldn't bother. That's not a game. That's not a game to fight. That's not a worthwhile thing to go pursue. But everybody's got their dreams, right? Everybody live your dreams. So this is where I break into song if I was that kind of guy. I'm not. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like, subscribe, click the bell for notifications. Most importantly, thanks for listening.